Good afternoon and welcome everyone. We've got about a minute until we get started. Thanks for everyone joining us today.
All right, good morning, everyone. And as Derek said, thanks for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to just give a quick rundown of some information for you all, and then go ahead and introduce our speakers for the day. All right, so welcome everyone. Just a few things about the training today. This is a webinar, so only the panelists today will have the ability to share their screen and have video and audio. But you can participate in the chat and go ahead and leave any questions you have throughout the presentation in the Q&A. We will have time to address your questions at the end, so feel free to pop those in. At the end of the training, we will be putting in a link to an evaluation that you will need to complete in order to receive CEUs for this webinar. And our administrative assistant, Olivia, will be sending your certificates in 1 week. So as you know, this is the Ready, Set, Go series. We're on our 3rd week, which is exciting. We've got a few more left. So today we're going to have Derek and Stacy talking about engaging your local media. And then in the next upcoming weeks, next week, we have a webinar on how you can work with your operators and hosts. And then our final week will conclude with a little overview of Ohio's new branded VEP program. So feel free to join us for those. If you want to go ahead and register for those, if you haven't already, please visit our website at pgnohio.org/ready-set-go. We're also posting recordings of previous webinars on there, so that's a great resource as well. Just a quick plug for the conference coming up. If you are interested in sports betting, the second day of the in-person conference will be dedicated to talking about sports betting in Ohio. We have a summit set up. We'll only be a month into sports betting operating, but it'll still be something that we can kind of join and talk about. We will also have a 2-day virtual pre-conference on the 7th and 9th, and then an in-person conference on February 23rd and 24th. So if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and visit pgnohio.org/conference. We also have a webinar coming up in a few weeks that'll kind of give you a better idea of what you can expect from the conference, a bit about the agenda, the speakers, and we'll be able to answer any questions you have. And I'd go ahead and put the link in for that. So you can go ahead and register at the link that I just posted in the chat. PGNO is a membership-based nonprofit. Our members are very important to us. They have helped us in the past year advocate for some of the consumer protections in the current sports betting legislation. Your dues directly support that, and our members are also very involved in advocacy through providing testimony and writing into their senators and representatives. We also provide training discounts to our members, as well as weekly or monthly webinars on various topics related to problem gambling. So if you're interested, you can visit pgnohio.org/membership. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook. We post a lot of stuff related to what we're doing, but also what our partners are doing, and local and national news on problem gambling. So if you want to stay in the know, definitely follow us on those 2 platforms. And then we have more training opportunities posted on our website at pgnohio.org/events. So if you're interested in more training, please visit there. And now I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers for the day. We have Derek Longmire, who is the Executive Director of PGNO and my boss, and Stacy Fronapple Hassan. We'll go ahead and read their bio. So Derek has been involved in social services field for over 30 years. He's presented at local, state, and national training throughout the U.S. And has served as the executive director since 2016. He serves in many statewide and national organizations and committees, including the National Council on Problem Gambling, the Board of Directors, NCPG Affiliate and Marketing Committee, the Ohio Problem Gambling Advisory Board, and a million others. He's very involved. So, and Stacy serves as the Chief of Prevention and Problem Gambling for the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. She manages the policy planning and public engagement for the statewide service system. And in addition, she's starting to oversee the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline services for the 988 implementation in Ohio. So that's just a bit about our presenters, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to Derek and Stacy.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Stacy will start us off, but I just want to thank Stacy Fronapple Hassan, mostly because I like to say Fronapple Hassan, for taking the time to join us today and share a lot of great information that she has. What Cheyenne failed to mention is that Stacy was the former director of the Department of Alcohol and Drug Addiction Services many years ago, and is a very well skilled and seasoned communicator. So she provides a lot of great tips and resources for us here today. And I'm trying to get our little PowerPoint to display. And as soon as I can do that, it should be coming onto your screens.
Thank you, Derek. And it's great to be with everybody here today. I wasn't the director of the department, but I was the communications director. So we don't want that getting around. So I do have a background in communications and working with media, and it's one of my many favorite topics. I noticed as people were signing in, I want to say hi to Belmont County folks. That's my home county. A strong advocate of Eastern Ohio, and hi to Carol Spiker from Kansas. Nice to see that you're on today, Carol. And then it's fantastic to see so many of you from across the state. Interested in this topic, and it could not be more timely. And we appreciate Problem Gambling Network of Ohio and Derek and his team in bringing this up, this series of 5 webinars very quickly and professionally, so that we can share more information before that January 1 launch. Next slide, please. So we have our objectives. We will be explaining strategies for engaging the media in covering problem gambling resources, understanding effective data-informed talking points, and we'll also be discussing opportunities for professionals to pitch to the media to get the most out of covering the story because of its timeliness. Next slide. I had fun finding some photos for Ohio specific. Carol, I'm sorry, there's no Kansas City Chiefs in this list, at least not that I recall. So where do you start? Media engagement to raise awareness. That is what we're doing today. That's where we'll be focusing. We have a Browns fan. I'm sure we have a few sorry Browns fans, but thanks for joining. I think you won this weekend, though. Somebody can verify that. I always have an ear on the score. Nope. All right. So again, sorry, but it was an awesome photo. It's very charismatic. So how can we raise awareness about, what this incredible change is that's happening on January 1st in Ohio? And yet we as Ohioans and Buckeyes know we've had a lot of problem gambling among sports gamblers long before January 1st of 2023. Next slide. So what are our focal points today? And Derek, so far I haven't even given you a breath of a chance to jump in. At any point, please just stop me. We'll be talking about the hook, and I use that term. It's a little bit old-fashioned now, but it's still the hook. Why should people care? We have a very, easy hook at this point in terms of sports gambling going live in Ohio. And there are other things that might appeal to a community-based audience in your part of the state, whether it be a demographic area, whether it be a particular population you're looking to reach, and we'll talk a lot more about that. Those are the local angles, and then we'll also get more into what do the key messages look like. We want to make sure that you are putting out, into the community what will appeal. Why is it important? How will it be appealing? To whom will it be appealing? And what do we have already to give you to make that as simple as possible? We believe in making things as turnkey as we possibly can. And we're going to talk through some of those opportunities today.
And just talking a moment about the hook, keeping in mind that for news to be newsworthy, it has to be something that's somewhat out of the norm. So really saying, yes, we did the same thing that we've always been doing. Nobody really cares about that. But if you can do something to make it timely, really specific to what's going on within your community, and then hopefully with those key messages to help support that, that will all be things that can kind of pique that interest for the individuals that are covering those stories.
And think about the broader audience. We'll get to this one in one second, but that broader audience is, how does this appeal to the gambler, him or herself? What about their family members? What about the businesses where they work? And that's anybody that's gambling. And we know, we've seen it even at the state level, where folks are banding together to bet on the Derby, for example, the Kentucky Derby. Everybody putting money in and, picking some horses, and yes, that's fun. And it can, in some cases, be a kind of a team building activity. But it also can have negative impacts, again, for an individual, a family, a workplace, and the community. And we'll talk again more about key messages as we get into it. So looking at this slide, I think it was the American Gaming Association, and this just came through my email box probably Thursday. The growth in gambling, and you see that one little dip for the second quarter of 2020. That's COVID, folks, when it comes to the gambling industry. And then there are 3 other quarters that are, below that 10 billion line. It's just kind of breathtaking. But sports gambling is a part of this. The gambling picture, from a broader perspective, is a major part of this, and it just continues to go up and up and up. Those of us with a prevention background, we know that the more things become normalized, the more likely they are to have greater participation. And we've seen that in a lot of different ways. And it used to be we were talking about marijuana, alcohol and other drugs, drugs of abuse. And this is gambling addiction. This is the path of normalization, the path of normalization for, our community, our families, whether it's the 2-year-old who's doing something that looks like a slot machine in his or her game, or it's the 20-year-old who is so excited about their birthday to go into one of Ohio's casinos because they'll be 21 years old. And now with sports gambling, it's another opportunity. And frankly, we know in Ohio that folks may have been gambling on sports, long before the first of the year. Derek, you want to add anything to this? Okay. So I thought, is there any more important way or any more kind of surprising way to say it? That's what we're looking at here. This is a game changer. Again, even though people have been sports gambling, now it's legal. Some of the stigma has left. And when we talk about stigma and normalization, this just becomes business as usual in many cases. There's, I have a Catholic, I mentioned Eastern Ohio, Catholic background, tip sheets and strips and gambling at bingo, the Knights of Columbus, where you put your scores in the little boxes, you name it. Gambling was part of the community from a very, very early age and continues to be part of our everyday community life. And now none of that is behind closed doors. None of that is people passing the tip sheet or the brackets, from person to person. It's big, it's public, it's a huge, huge business. Next slide. This seems redundant. But let's talk about it a little bit. The largest expansion of gambling in Ohio's history, the largest launch of legal gambling, gaming, and the gambling that comes with it in the nation. That is monumental. Ohio took its time in getting to this point. There was a lot of work, a lot of advocacy. Problem Gambling Network of Ohio was very involved in that advocacy to try to make it the best possible experience from a consumer protection point of view. But at this point, we have the legal gambling coming in. So we have to be ready for it. We want to make everybody across the state aware of what this means. It's not just that folks can gamble every minute of the day. Whether you're gambling on football on Monday night or soccer, I don't know, out of Japan, for example, at a totally different time zone. It's all possible. Do they play soccer in Japan? I hope so. It's nonstop. And we also know that it is causing increased calls to helplines. So we're working with our own helpline. We want to make sure that they are ready for this increase. We have the data to tell us sports gambling is already a problem. We're already seeing increased calls to these helplines in other states. It's a tsunami.
Just to add to that, just looking at the current data we have with the helpline, right now we've seen a record increase in calls that we haven't seen in the last, since I've been following it. So for whatever reason, more people are calling the helpline, which is great. We can help direct people to the resources that are available. And with the helpline, we get a report every single month of the number of calls that are received by the helpline and the number of counties, the number of calls per county. So that information may be helpful as you work with media and trying to pitch that story if we're seeing those upticks in trends. Just another thing to consider.
And we are happy to share the helpline information at any point if you're willing to, if you'd like to see that. As Derek says, it is also broken down by county and major cities. We're also concerned about a few other factors with this. We know that people love to watch sports. They also love to have favorite athletes. And now with fantasy sports, so many athletes have become celebrities. People follow them, they cheer for them. They are on everybody's social media. Peyton Manning just hosted the Country Music Awards. I can't really explain that, but he's become a personality. His brother, he's trying to become a personality. And it's extremely concerning because of how popular all of that is. And we know that folks like to, add excitement to the games with placing a bet. And because sports are so incredibly popular in the United States, that doesn't leave out hardly anybody, depending on what folks like to watch and like to participate in. We also know that college and amateur sports are available now for people to gamble on. I mean, that in itself is a hook. Not that there weren't side bets on whether Toledo was going to beat Marshall. And I'm not sure how that particular battle came out this year. But we have those rivalries. We have schools that we went to. Everybody has kind of has a stake in the game, so to speak. There's so much excitement about it. And now even college and amateur sports, an amateur boxing match, for example, it is legal to place those bets on that. Next slide. I need to move our photos. There we go. I thought that was my eyes for a second. So it's moving a little bit. What do we know about sports gambling now across the state? These are statewide statistics, but we do have this kind of data for your communities, for Ohio communities, based on the 2017 survey. We can say, for example, what these data points look like in Mahoning County, in Preble County. I think I saw Amanda, Portage County. So if you don't have your localized data, we can provide that to you. You need to know, and we'll talk more about, knowing the audience, knowing your customer. The more you know, the more focused you can make your media engagement strategies. Why should someone from the media care? Not necessarily because of statewide data, but because of what you can tell them about your community and your neighbors. We know that with more gambling, there may be increases in how many folks are problem gambling and gambling disorder. And just so you're aware, we have a new Ohio gambling survey in the field right now. There was one done in 2012, there was one done in 2017, and the 2022 survey is occurring now, and we will have a data set prior to the launch of sports gambling, although the analysis will take at least a couple months before we'll be able to share data. We'll be collecting up until launch date in 2023. And keep in mind that, again, it's not just about the gambler, him or herself. It's about that broader group, that family, that community, that workplace, that faith-based population, college population. Where do you want to send your message? Next slide. Okay, we're localizing it now, and we've been talking about that a little bit as we go through here. And I am getting caught up here. I saw this actually on those of you who have followed along at some level with our Get Set Before You Bet campaign. The company that does that for us, Origo Branding, has a new website. I checked it out today. And one of the things they have on there, I'm just putting credit where credit's due. What you do starts with what you know. That's a good line. I'm stealing it. What you do starts with what you know. I'll let Alessandra know I did it. It's important to tailor the pitch to the story that you want folks to hear about. You'll see, that we have some ideas here on the slide, but what can you do in order to pull people in, whether that is the reporter that you're trying to sell it to, or those folks that will be listening to the interview, your audience. We'll be happy to send you your local data. We are very excited that reporters are willing to cover this story now. When it comes to media engagement, it used to be a very hard sell to get to people wanting to talk about gambling, problem gambling, gambling disorder, just like substance use disorder and mental health issues. All of those are surrounded in stigma, really. So much of that has been chipped away at over the years. And we now know that when it's Problem Gambling Awareness Month or the sports gambling launch, and also September Problem Gambling, what's the September?
Responsible Gaming Education Month.
Thank you. Responsible Gaming Education Month. There's actually quite a bit of interest from a public relations perspective. So I guess, take that as an opportunity, absolutely, to engage the media in your area. And we'll get more into that as we move forward. But behavioral health and talking about behavioral health, and in fact, unfortunately, there's an opportunity in every disaster. And COVID was another one of those. We all know what a disaster it was, and so many people lost their lives, but everybody is talking about behavioral health. Everybody is talking about mental health, about depression. What's one of the ways that people self-medicate? They gamble. Older folks don't feel pain as much when they're focused on gambling. Younger people aren't worried about, what those issues are at home or at work. Across the ages, gambling is one of those kind of replacement mechanisms. Some people eat, some people gamble, some people exercise, but it has appeal for a lot of audiences. Derek, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to talk about making sports gambling legalized or making it localized to your community. When I get media requests, I ask the interviewer what area they're calling from and try to make those connections with the local prevention and treatment providers within those areas. And then depending on kind of the focus or direction of the story, also connect them with the casino or racing that may be nearby for just kind of general sports betting or general gambling questions. So as you're looking specifically at sports betting, think about how that's going to be changing your environment. And this really opens the door to establish some new relationships that you may not have had a relationship with before. So as we know, for sports betting, the opportunity for sports betting is going to extend beyond our 4 casinos and 7 racinos. And for many of you, mobile, in your phone, accessible gambling is going to be much more available than it ever has before. And it could be either through mobile, or it could also be through the Type C that we talked about in the first session, with those machines that you're going to see at your bars and restaurants and maybe your local Kroger. This is a prime opportunity to start establishing those relationships with those local establishments. And I don't want to steal too much thunder from next week, but just kind of a little plug of start thinking about who those new partners could be and develop those relationships so that when it comes to the media requests, you can say, yes, not only can I provide my perspective, but I can also share how we're able to partner on this issue, especially related to making sure that we're minimizing the risk for our citizens around sports betting. So find friends, and your reporters will appreciate that.
And they will often ask, and many of you probably have had this experience, they will ask, do you have somebody who can talk about his or her gambling? And that's, if you're not with a treatment focused agency, you might want to, as Derek said, partner with one, because making it personal is what really counts. Mary Haven had a husband and wife that did a lot of outreach for them for a while. And the husband was in recovery, and the wife was an incredible advocate for him, but also for problem gambling recovery in general. And what a powerful story that was. And it was covered extensively in Central Ohio. Next slide. So which way do you go? There's so many options. And, having been in communications for a long time, there's traditional media, there's non-traditional media, even more options than what we used to have. But the first thing that we want to make sure you do is that know your customer. KYC is used all the time in the gambling space to verify things like age, to make sure that legal gambling is actually appropriate for an individual. But know your customer applies in so many other places. You can't develop a communications plan to get the word out until you have done some research and have a better sense of who it is you want to reach. Next slide. So what are those options? As I said, there are so many of them. Do you want to reach out through a podcast? Is it your podcast? Is it a podcast of someone in your area? Are they odds makers? Is it that kind of a show? Are you trying to reach older adults? Is it the senior newspaper in your community? I mentioned bingo. Is it the bingo magazine? We've actually placed some of the Get Set Before You Bet marketing and messaging in the bingo magazine. And some of you probably are wondering what that is. It exists. It's real. Do you want to do outreach through sports programs, sporting events? And so many pop-ups. I guess I could have disabled those. Sports talk shows. And especially when we're talking about odds, I mean, they're on all the time. They're on pretty much every ESPN channel. But in your community and specific to your community, that's also the conversation on local radio, on local television, on the noon shows. Next slide.
Well, and just
Go ahead.
to recap what you were saying, Stacy, with sports talk. Many times in media requests, I talk to everyone but the sports talk people because there's not been a fit, where again, this just creates an opportunity to open a new door to paths that we may not have had access to before. So don't only focus on the media channels or the outlets that you've used previously. Really think about with this new landscape, what additional opportunities might present.
Excellent. So I've been referencing this, KYC, know your customer. Who should you be reaching? Who do you want to reach? And what is that based on? What data, what information do you have to establish that audience? Gender, age, demographic factors. Consider all of that. In general, when you want to engage the media, not in general, every time you need to have your communication goals laid out. What do you want them to know? What do you feel that they need to know? What is that call to action in your messaging? I wanted to introduce kind of an example, and thinking of the time of year it is. I thought, well, let's talk about this from the perspective of a diet company. Pretend like you're seeing it on your Instagram, and it's called Best Diet Plan Ever. Okay. Best Diet Plan Ever wants to market itself. They want to engage media. They want to purchase advertising. And what would they want people to know? What would those key messages be for Best Diet Plan Ever? What would they already know about their customers? What could they assume about their customers? We'll start there. They want to lose weight, right? Their customers want to lose weight. Their customers may be overweight. It's a pretty easy assumption, which is true for pretty much every community in the United States. Health conscious. That's a fact that they can assume based on their customers. Concerned about appearances. Okay. That would be a factor. Know your customer. And we'll talk more as we dig into, who the customer would be with this example on another slide. Derek, you want to add to this one?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, next. All right. So this young man, who am I? And we'll also look at a young woman. And the facts may not be specific to either, but in this case, the people in Ohio at risk for problem gambling based on our 2017 data, 19% were African American, 12% other races, 9% white, and nearly 15% were of Hispanic or Latinx ethnicity. A few very small percentage more men likely to be gamblers than women, but Ohio is kind of anomalous in that space. It's very close in Ohio, the male to female gamblers. Of those who gamble on sports, 2.6% were of all, 2.6% were sports gamblers. But for those who gamble on sports, 24.4% were at risk. 1 out of every 4. That was, it took us aback, I'll say, when we first saw that statistic. And the last bullet there, young men ages 18 to 24 are more likely to drink to excess while they're gambling. The question on the survey is, have you ever gambled while intoxicated? We had a county, and I won't mention it, that had 55% of those young men self-reporting gambling while intoxicated. Does that tell you anything? Would it, would it help drive the audience you want to reach, the messaging channels that you want to follow? As much as you can gather data, as much as you can know your customer, that will help direct your communications plan.
And that's where that board specific or regional specific data will be so helpful to really know what's happening within your community, so you can paint that picture as localized as possible, because that means a whole lot more than saying, well, our national averages are X, Y, and Z. And you say, this is what's happening here in our community. And you are those subject matter experts that can provide that information that those media outlets won't have access to otherwise, or likely wouldn't.
So how do you reach, if it was that young man we were just looking at, how would you reach him? Where does he go? Where does he hang out? What does he listen to? Is it Sirius Radio? Is it The Fan, which is sports talk radio? Does he have the ESPN package? Those kinds of things. If you decide you're spending money on communications and you're buying cable, for example. But if you're pitching media, then you can also pitch to sports talk. And that's another option. What do they watch? What are they doing in their free time? Is he part of a city basketball league? Do you have city leagues that you can appeal to? What about gyms, recreational facilities? And jumping back over to our example of the company Best Diet Plan Ever, where do those customers go? What are the best places to appeal to those customers? Again, maybe recreational facilities, parks, gyms, game fields. Those are all opportunities to reach that particular customer. Next slide. And I really liked her sign. It was cute. So what about the young woman? Almost as many women as men gamble. They're equally likely to be at risk for problem gambling. And this third bullet is actually across gender. Most likely to be under a doctor's care due to stress, 20% of at-risk problem gamblers. More than 26% reported serious depression. Those are very high numbers as well. When folks wonder why they should care about problem gambling and gambling disorder, we look back at these data points. These are individuals who aren't just gambling and aren't just having a problem with gambling, but they're having a problem in so many areas of their lives. When you look at 26% with serious depression. So again, go ahead, please.
I was going to mention with that, and we'll talk about pitching a story in just a second, but really thinking about those other times of year when there's that correlation that comes into play. And at PGNO, we worked with Suicide Prevention Foundation for September because that is Suicide Prevention Month. And that's a perfect, easy tie-in there. April is Alcohol Awareness Month, and we know the connection between gambling and alcohol use. May is Mental Health Month. So always a good opportunity to find those partnerships and tie-ins to help show a broader story. And I think in the world of gambling, we've certainly come a long way from the nobody cares about gambling kind of response that I got earlier on. But the more we can find those partners and continue to showcase the importance, in as many ways as possible, that will all be helpful in making sure that people really understand the impact of gambling beyond just kind of what they think it might look like.
And it's a year round. We're talking a lot about January 1st, 2023, but we look at promoting and outreach for problem gambling on a year-round basis. So each one of those observations is another hook, another opportunity to reach out to local media. And you don't want to do it every month as you develop a communications plan. Maybe it's once a quarter, once every 3 months you are engaging media and you want to move it around a little bit. It's a strong strategy to develop a relationship with local media, but don't go to the well over and over and over again to the same person. Spread that around and try to have as broad of a familiarity with your local media as you can. We were talking about places again. Are there other places that you should look to if it is, a female audience you're appealing to? One of those factors that we saw on the last survey was that middle-aged rural women were more likely to be problem gamblers than those in metropolitan urban areas. Why is that? We don't have a good handle on the why, but where would we be more likely to reach those middle-aged rural women? Would that be a faith-based opportunity? Would that be connecting with schools, with clubs, organizations? Same thing with middle-aged and older men, clubs, organizations, civic organizations. There's a lot of opportunities. You just want to think through that a little bit more. Next slide. Okay, getting down to basics. We've been talking about knowing your local media, having the relationship as much as you can. Reporters change, but quite often there will be someone, who you have seen over time. You can invite out to coffee. You can talk about a story idea, maybe before it's time. Kind of break the ice, have that conversation, and then say, this is coming up. This is coming up in a month. It's coming up in 2 months. And I'd love to have the opportunity to talk to you about that. Some of the noon entertainment type shows book pretty far out, even as much as 3 months out. So if it's an actual news item, you're not looking that far in advance. But if it's one of the more entertainment type shows, you might want to connect 2 or 3 months in advance to get on their calendar for the week that you want or the month that you want. Derek, did you jump in?
No, I think that's all good information to have. And
Okay.
Just thinking about how long you're going to have and how much time you need to prep. Sometimes media will reach out and say, I'm writing the story right now or covering the story right now, and it needs to go to press tomorrow. Well, that that lead up is going to look a whole lot differently than if you're pitching a story and have the benefit of that time. And also keeping in mind that that story that you pitched today may sit in their desk and be something that they'll get to eventually. And then 2 months from now, they'll reach out and say, hey, I have a deadline tomorrow. This is an area that we can focus on. Can you talk? So kind of always having to be prepared to respond to media whenever it comes up. But the more prepared you can be on the front end, then better off you'll be on the back end.
Sweeps week, gambling, drugs, alcohol, sex, all those things end up being, it's kind of what they grab for things like sweeps week, because people will pay attention, the sexy stories. So you can always find that online if you don't know when, those periods hit. And that's a popular time for reporters to reach out. Also, they, around the state, will do special sections. And every once in a while, there'll be a special section on mental health or addiction issues. And that's a good time to both spend a little money, but also have the opportunity to talk about sports gambling and prevention and responsible gambling.
And I've been keeping track of the things in the chat, and there's a few questions that have come up, and I'll get to those at the end, but I wanted to comment on something that Catherine just dropped in the chat, and she wrote, our local media just did a special on sports betting. It was mainly highlighting how great it will be for our area and how much money it will bring to the area. They interviewed politicians. And when you see those opportunities, that's a great time to pitch that story. And it can be, thank you for covering this important topic. We noticed through that coverage that you didn't mention some of the challenging effects related to this expansion of sports, this expansion of gambling. And we know based on our data that 1 in 4 Ohioans are at risk for developing a gambling problem. At a minimum, or for future consideration, would you consider including the Ohio Problem Gambling Helpline and or beforeyoubet.org to additional reporting, and let me know if you have additional questions. So you're kind of following up to a story that didn't touch on the things that you wanted it to, and then you can give them kind of, in doing that, also pitching another angle to the story that they covered.
And I like that Derek pointed that out from a very positive perspective. Even though the politicians may have talked about how great this would be from a financial perspective, go positive, be positive. It's just another side. And we want folks to also be aware of, with the good comes the potential challenges of problem gambling and gambling disorder, but responsible gambling tips are also part of what you want to share. I also happened to, while Derek was talking, I saw Larry McCullough's pop up. We can send you Summit County's data set. And we can do that after the program. All right, next slide.
So just some general tips that I have for after you pitch that story and you say, great, we want to talk to you. And these are just the 5 tips that I came up with, and I'm sure Stacey has a whole book of them. But the first is just, as you're being interviewed, to listen carefully. Sometimes we're preparing in our head for what we want our answer to be, and we don't actually then hear the full question. So take a few moments, really have those good listening ears on so you can respond in an appropriate way. And that kind of leads into my second tip, which is just take time to respond, especially if you're in the glorious moment of being pre-recorded. Take that moment, think about the question for a moment, and then you can provide a thoughtful answer. And I guess along that is don't really rush or speak too quickly to fill that silence. And as one who tends to be a fast talker anyway, it's always that reminder to me to say, okay, slow down and speak at a pace that would make sense. Along those lines is just be prepared. You can't know every question that every reporter is going to ask you, but with the talking points that Stacey talked about, just a few bulleted items, then that can get you prepared. And as they're bringing up those questions, then you have those to draw from because you've read through and you kind of have those set in your head. It's also good just to ask how much time you have for the interview or how the interview will be presented. So will it be something where you're going to have at best a little soundbite, or is this going to be a much more detailed and in-depth story that they want to cover? Because sometimes you'll only get that a few seconds, and sometimes you'll have the benefit of more time. And then, kind of as Stacy mentioned earlier, with that positive angle of things, really be agreeable. They're not out to get you. They want to cover a story and hopefully your side of the story. So be pleasant, be helpful, respond to things you can in the now. And if there's other things that you have to follow up with, follow up, provide that additional information, make those connections. If they have a question about, well, where did that data come from? Then make sure that you provide that up, follow up with that data information. And then the last thing is just interview with confidence. The more comfortable you are, the better you'll come across, and the better it will be for you to be interviewed, which then gives the media one more reason to come back to you the next time the questions come up, that you are a trusted, reputable source that is good to work with. So those are kind of my top 5 interview tips. Stacy, do you have other tips to share?
You made me think of a couple, and if it is being pre-recorded, and that will usually be radio or television, it's okay. And Lord knows I've done it. If you flub something, or if you don't think it came out the way you intended it to, just say, hey, can we stop and back up for a minute? And they'll let you. If it's live, don't do that. But for any pre-recorded opportunity, it's okay. Take advantage of the chance to, give it a second shot. The reporters do it all the time. So we should take advantage of that ourselves. And I agree, interview with confidence. And if you don't know something, that's okay too. There's no way you're going to know every statistic that you're being asked to respond to. You can always tell the reporter, I can follow up on that. And if it has for example, if it's going to air later, or if it's going to be in print, which would be later, then absolutely get back to them with that information as promised, because you're also building that relationship for the future. Next slide.
Ties in nicely with that even better, and especially with that B-roll. Can you talk a little bit, Stacy, about what B-roll is for those that aren't aware?
Sure. Whether it's online, whether it's on a website, whether it's an online news article or television, cable, there's background video playing, often behind or in the corner when the announcers are speaking, when they may be putting bullets up on the screen to emphasize a point. There might be video behind it. When it comes to Ohio's casinos and racinos, you can pretty much bet that what they're going to put back there is somebody rolling dice, or looking at a roulette wheel, or horse racing, etc. So they have all of that B-roll, ready to go with. It's nice when you have the opportunity, or we as a state have the opportunity to do some B-roll and provide it for them. With the recent launch of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline 988, we went out to some of the 988 call centers. We shot B-roll and we made that available to the media so that we would have that kind of positive activity going on behind the story, instead of an ambulance pulling up in front of some place and, putting someone on a gurney in the ambulance. You can help control how the message is received by providing that B-roll as well.
And I think that's such an important thing to be able to provide. And I just think about our COVID time, and the B-roll was all the people getting shots. Well, that's not the thing that you want to focus on. You don't want to focus on the people getting the shot in the arm. You want to focus on hugging the kids and doing things that they're not able to do. So if you can control that B-roll, then you can really put the spin on the story that you want it to be. Otherwise, it leads it up to them to kind of draw their own conclusions. And many times that B-roll can turn into some of the doom and gloom that we don't really want to to have that be the focus. We want to provide help and get resources to people. We don't want to show devastation, because that doesn't really help our cause.
I was using an example of the best diet plan ever. And I've seen this on TV. If without a like health and wellness kind of B-roll, what the media always goes back to, and I swear I've seen the same woman probably in many B-rolls, a relatively larger woman walking down the street, they're shooting her from the backside. It's terrible. It's terrible video. I've seen it several times in different shows. I don't know if it's in some kind of a stock video clip place. It probably is. But that's why, if you can control it, please do it. And now we all have iPhones in our hands. You have good video that you can produce yourself, and it's not easy. I mean, it's not hard. We want to back that up. I'm going to say it again. Produce the video yourselves, and it's not hard, and it's not expensive. Okay. So what are those key messages? We will be sharing some message points with you. We're going to send, some follow-up after this presentation, and that will include some of the key messaging that you've seen, background information and potential messages here in this webinar. We have things like we have the 1-800 helpline, 1-800-589-9966. That's a key message. We want to get that out. We want people to hear it and know it, or at least have it somewhere. Folks to go to beforeyoubet.org. And then there's a / sports betting. Actually, we'll show that in a minute. There are responsible gambling tools like the voluntary exclusion program, which you'll hear more about in the next week or so. In your community, do you want to drive people to a behavioral health agency for a screening? Do we want people to take the quiz on Get Set Before You Bet? And that's been a common call to action of a lot of the responsible gambling messaging that we've had around the state. Other thoughts, Derek?
No, I think those are important ones. But again, just the more consistent we can be and really leaning into the toolkits and resources available, that while you're pitching messages to your own store, to your own media, that it will be supported in other media outlets throughout the state. So the more kind of just the notion of high tides lift all boats or ships or whatever that phrase is. I'm terrible at those. But just kind of that notion that we have great resources available. You don't have to work and figure out what to say or do. We can have a lot of that support already prepackaged for you.
Next slide. And the resources that we've referenced will all be in the slides as you receive them. And I think we could jump to the next slide. And more resource and links. I believe that closes us out, except for a couple of backgrounds. All right.
Catherine asked one about data and statistics, so make sure you follow the chat if you weren't, and Claire dropped in a few resources there. Jason asks, hi all, has there been any clarification on how operators will be receiving statewide self-exclusion lists from the state? And I will say, Jason, hold that question for December 5th, when we have Susan Diamond with the Ohio Lottery Commission and Corey Brown with the Casino Control Commission to talk all about the statewide voluntary exclusion program and how all of that will work. So I could say something, but it may not be accurate. So I will say, I don't know the answer to that. I will, but come back to us on December 5th. And then Lori asks, as gaming and acceptance goes up, our awareness and education efforts need to increase as well. Will there be any additional funds to support this? Our local dollars have not increased since our original allocation in state fiscal year 13.
That is true. One thing that I can say is the center, which is the Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health Prevention and Promotion, just had an opportunity to receive $50,000 grants for any campaign of folks' choice. And I know that one or two of those that applied applied to do a problem gambling prevention, responsible gambling campaign using Get Set Before You Bet. So that was an opportunity that is actually closed at this point. We have other opportunities within the, within Ohio MHAS. And if you have, I would say reach out to us. If there's something that you want to do. Prevention Action Alliance also put out education and skill building grants. And I believe that opportunity is closed as well at this point. Lori, I'm thinking maybe you got one of those. So I encourage you to, everybody, to look for those opportunities. They'll continue to come out. And if there's something that you feel is very much needed in your community and innovative, please reach out to us at Ohio MHAS. There are times when we can support necessary and innovative projects, kind of out of the normal course of events.
I have Stacy's contact information there on the screen. You can email her at stacy.fronapfel. She didn't put Fronapfel-Hassan at mha.ohio.gov. And just another question that was in the chat, and I know we are at 2 o'clock right now, so I won't keep anyone any longer. The question was, sorry if this was covered last week, does the mobile aspect of sports gambling allow users to access the casino function of the app, or is it just limited to gambling on sports? So the mobile sports betting applications will be exclusive to the sports are legalized or regulated through the Ohio Casino Control Commission, and other iLottery type products are not permissible on January 1st. So hopefully I answered that question. Thank you all for your time today. Again, look for that follow-up survey in your, or I guess the survey was dropped in the chat. And Olivia, if you could drop that in one more time, so it's close there at the bottom, that would be wonderful. Complete that survey, and then Olivia will send out that certificate for you. And look forward to you joining us next time as we really take all this information and focus more on what you can do at the local level to develop those partnerships, relationships, and really work to build the gambling service system within your community. Thank you again, and thank you to Stacy, and look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thanks, everybody. Email if you want your local data.
Thanks all.